guys.
Okay, Al, we're ready.
Yeah. I'm just letting you guys know what's going on. Just a very quick question for you guys. You guys at back, can you see the screen okay? Is it visible enough? I'm getting lots of thumb up, so that's good. What I'm going to do now is we're going to have, actually, to be candid, this is something new for me. So what we've got is the global virtual design sprint team. They're running multiple remote sprints around the world. And what we're going to do is, what we're going to do this morning is have them showcase some of the work they're doing. We'll be looking at live sprints and having a peek at some of the stuff they're currently engaged on. In parallel with that, they're going to show you some of the templates and the approach they've taken to facilitating and managing teams across multiple international locations. And then we're going to move on to have a discussion around how you might want to kickstart remote sprints in your own environment, and how you might want to see if some of this stuff is applicable in your own environment. So without any further ado, I'm just going to crank up the volume, and we'll see if we can be live online.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
I think we can, yes, we can hear that. You've got a thumbs up. So you're so now you're live online, look, Robert.
And everyone.
I'm going to hand over everything now to you. This is Robert Skrobe, who's from Dallas Sprints. I think you're in Dallas, aren't you, Robert? And I'll let you hand over and
if I'm down,
introduce the team.
I hope I'm there. Yeah, I think I am.
Introduce us. We want to be introduced.
Okay, here we go. Then I'll run through the introductions. I was going to let you do the introductions,
Robert, you want to introduce us?
I can do them. Yeah. No, I thought Andrew was going to go, you know what? I'm good at introductions. I'm just going to go ahead and work this out. So
I know you know them better, Robert.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. They're nice people. They're good. So hello, everybody. My name is Robert Skrobe. I am your co-host, many co-hosts for Dallas Design Sprints and for this presentation on virtual remote design sprints. I'm accompanied by many, just a great set of professionals that are going to be presenting in one form, fashion, or another. There's Sandy Lamb, who is a product designer at Software AG. She's also my partner for the Global Virtual Design Sprint, and we'll get into that in a little bit. You have the infamous and famous at the same time, Mark Tippin from Mural. He is also head of the Luma Institute, I believe, and is
I will course correct a little bit. Not the head of the Luma Institute.
Okay, sorry.
Chris Pacquion will come find me and hunt me down and kick my behind.
Okay.
I am a lead instructor with them, however.
Okay.
Please continue.
All right. Yeah, I would never want to get you in trouble, Mark, but I still.
You'd hurt me.
All right. You're amazing, though. Okay. Then we have Lindsey.
Mine you are, yeah.
Lindsey Eatough. I believe that's how I properly pronounce your name, correct?
Eatough, but close. I've heard it all.
All right, you can holler at me later. Mark did it publicly. You can do it privately. She's also from Mural. She's going to be part of the presentation today. And then we have Lee Duncan from IBM. He's a veteran of UX design and a thought leader. And if you just do a Google search or a LinkedIn search on him, you're going to find out how special he is. All of these folks are going to be joining me today in this presentation. So we're really looking forward to it, and hopefully you'll get a lot of value and a lot from it. So we'll dive right into it. For today on the agenda, we just went through introductions. We're going to go into the Global Virtual Design Sprint that just completed. It was over a month long of virtual design sprints. We're going to highlight particular projects. We'll go into about a little bit of Q&A afterwards to make sure that we close any gaps of understanding or what that was all about. Then we're going to bring in more people to kind of explain how to do your own virtual sprint. We'll take some time to kind of go over the nuances of that, as well as the various steps that are involved. And we'll take about 5 minutes at the end to close out and cover anything we didn't cover in the main presentation. Now, for those of you who are a fan of Mentimeter, we're going to be employing that in this presentation. And I'll zoom in a little bit on this so that you can see a little bit better. And Mark, is this updated, this particular image?
This is, yep. So if you use autocorrect in the chat is forcing Mentimeter into centimeter. So I'll stop posting information there. If you have a personal device and you use your browser on mobile or laptop over Wi-Fi, go to www.menti.com and make note of those 6 numbers, 62, 24, 41. You'll see a page, and at any time you can use that to just type in questions. And we're going to be using that as a way to capture questions and then kind of synthesize them and get them answered halfway through our presentation.
Yep, there's that right there. Okay. Right, so I'm going to go back into full screen so that you don't have to work out all the details of my interface. Zoom out a little bit, and we'll get started. Okay, so first off, we're going to get into something called the Global Virtual Design Sprint. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, this is an event that started last year as a pilot, as a response to a lot of people in this space getting masterclass certificates on design sprints and wondering how they could have an outlet to basically practice that. I thought, since I had done some organization before around groups, that it would be pretty cool if we gave people an outlet to basically practice this, but do it in an online fashion, since I couldn't go out to Germany or to Japan or Hong Kong or even Australia to work with people face to face. I thought there was an avenue to kind of do this online. Now, the 2 people I'm featuring here, you may be familiar with them. The first one is Sabrina Gorge. She's the product strategist and design sprint master for Design Sprint Studio. She's the person that came up with the concept of Global Virtual Design Sprint, the name as it was during the pilot. And then everything about the design sprint process is coming from Jake Knapp, the person who wrote the sprint book that you're probably familiar with. I think everyone in the crowd is familiar with it. It's this kind of sprint, it's Sydney Sprint Camp. I think I'm in the right space. But essentially, the idea was to take his concept and his process and project it out into a virtual environment. Now, I want to make one note when I say virtual. Some people may think I'm talking about VR glasses and Oculus and so on, so that we're actually putting Post-it notes in a virtual environment. But what virtual means in relation to remote is that everyone is on their own screen. This is not a couple people that are remote to a team and the rest of the team is kind of looking at like a telecommunications device that's projecting the group from that meeting room. This is everyone being on their own computer and coming into a screen and making that concentration. So what you're seeing on the screen now is basically the setup for the GVDS. The idea is that we get 6 to 12 professionals and practitioners of different disciplines, whether it's research or design or advising or strategy, and bringing them together around an idea or challenge. We'll give them some time to kind of research and figure out what they're going to be doing. Have them plan and execute a design sprint of various length, be it like 3 days or 5 days or however long the team wants to do. And then the goal is to have them share their stories, network with other people that they had met, and just enjoy themselves. Take the time to be in this process that allows for really expansive and like exploratory activities around the challenges that they were coming for. And there's a couple of big questions I get all the time about this event, which is who is it for? And as you can see, there's people of all stripes that come to this, and there can be one group I'll point out in particular are researchers. This event tends to bring in a lot of researchers of different disciplines, and the same thing with designers. Especially this year, we had somebody that was concentrating on voice join us as well. For people that are asking, why in the heck are you doing this? This is like 2 months of getting everyone together, and it's like, it seems like it's a lot of work, and it is. But you have to understand this is something that kind of aligns with my own personal and professional desire to give practitioners a platform to stand on, to showcase what they're really all about, to give them a chance that they normally wouldn't have to really showcase their strengths, their talents, how they work with one another, to network, and give them a chance that they never would have outside of their own work environment or some volunteer organizations that they belong to. I really believe that this is a method for kind of putting people on a pedestal in a very positive light. So, and this, people were always asking, you know, what happens with this? What goes on? And the past two events have been an entire month of design sprints. So we're not just doing 1 week, we're doing a full month. And by month, I mean the month isn't just one long design sprint. It's maybe 4 virtual design sprints week 1, 6 design sprints week 2, another 4 in week 3, and so on. So it kind of works out like that. And the other thing I'll point out also is that this time around, in the one we just did in November, we introduced a couple of things like educational courses on virtual design sprinting, where I'm just about to release a kit, a social media kit for all of the people who participated to promote their personal brand, their reputation, their work, and kind of get them into the notion of really telling and selling what they did. So that in a nutshell is what the Global Virtual Design Sprint is. What I'm about to show you now, and I'm kind of zooming out a bit to give you an idea, out of the 14 teams that came and were part of this, these are 5 samples of teams that came together to kind of illustrate what I was just talking about, and how all of them came together for a different challenge. So I'll start from the left and work my way over vertically or horizontally to the right. So at some point I'm going to stop because Sandy Lamb, the other person that's here with me, maybe can talk and speak a little bit in detail about the work she did for this team. But for now, the first one I'll highlight is the Next Generation Innovator team, where basically they were termed Team Fuzzy Bunny. I'm not kidding. I made that name up because I thought they would change it, but they didn't. And their whole charge was basically to look at how to help school-age kids with design thinking and design sprints for solving various issues or various problems. They would involve parents, they would involve educators, and it was up to them to figure out what kind of how they were going to curate that challenge and what the potential solution was. And I'll zoom in a little bit. They got a little crazy with something called Snapchat camera or Snap camera, where they can do different faces, and it kind of showcased the camaraderie they had and basically working in the space. They eventually came up with something called Design Box, which is a method for kind of showcasing design thinking to kids in the 6 to 12 age range, but introducing it as a way so that it was portable, it wasn't permanent to the classroom, but it was something that basically that would introduce them to the concept of design thinking in a way that was aligned with their particular age group. And I'm doing a very high level pass at this because the solution itself is probably way more detailed than I want to get into here. But this is just one example of a team that took on a challenge, went through a week of a design sprinting and came up with this all online. They had never met in person. They just basically worked together in Mural, the application that you're viewing now to kind of showcase this particular presentation. Zoom, I think we migrated to Basecamp late, but all sorts of different tools they use to basically coordinate with one another. Now, Sandy, like I mentioned, I kind of highlighted you before about purpose-driven employment, which was, and by the way, I should mention, all of these challenges were all kind of curated by the people you're seeing here. They were peer reviewed and voted, and the top voted challenges were considered by the teams in terms of what they wanted to adopt. So it wasn't anything I gave them or told them to do. This was essentially their way of picking and choosing which challenges they wanted to go to. So Sandy, with your experience with purpose-driven employment in this team, maybe you can go into a little bit about what you experienced and what this was like.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So hi, my name is Sandy. So as mentioned, I was part of this team called the Team Talent, and our challenge was purpose-driven employment. We had 12 team members, so it was a very challenging design sprint to facilitate. And I actually don't believe that we can actually do this in a physical environment, but it was possible because we did it in a remote format. And the second challenge that we had was also because it's a talent sprint, which is a format that we want to showcase different people and how they think and how they come to this idea and challenges. But as you may know, in this design sprint format, we try to reduce discussions, but in talent sprint, we also want to encourage more discussions. So at the same time, it was very, very difficult for me to facilitate this group, but in the end, I think I found the sweet spot where we could have found the balance of it. So we also had a lot of fun with it. Like we also used the Snapcam, and we also bring in the physical sticky notes into this remote environment. So we were playing with sticky notes and then putting them on our face. So we just had great fun of it. And by the end of the day, we end up with a solution to help companies to find employees with matching purpose, which is called the tribe. And we chose this name because we believe like tribes has this this image of that they are often very loyal to each other and they are often very engaged. And we have integrated this solution in a landing page for building a community from a very diverse group of people with a common beliefs. And there will be like in this solution, there are different tools, activities, exercise like the Inkigai or like talent sprints, so then we can help matching skills and purpose in a very holistic way. So yeah, it was really, really fun to work with and challenging as well. So back to you, Robert.
Yeah, and yeah, it's one of those things that even the same feeling you have after a design sprint, it's a physical design sprint, a virtual design sprint can be just as taxing because it's similar to remote work that you do online. You tend to do a lot more work and get a lot more involved with your team normally than you would, but it's both online and offline kind of engagements that we're talking about. So thank you very much for that, Sandy. And so really quick, kind of covering the last three here, we had Christmas consumerism, a topic where we were trying to see if we can reduce the carbon footprint of the returns and other things that kind of go into Christmas. There were some people that were very spirited about this one, no pun intended. There's also, we took on something that came from a director, I think it was an art director, about customer returns. And that's also dealt with in the same vein. And then we had one for healthy digital lifestyle for children, where reducing screen time and promoting a healthy lifestyle was core to what they were concentrating on. And they came up with an app for their particular approach. Now, and lastly, I'll kind of close this out with a few things to kind of note about this event. It's not just the fact that we came together for virtual design sprints and kind of highlighted and promoted everyone in terms of who they were as professionals. But we had some elements that were curated from this event that were noteworthy and people should probably be aware of. For example, Jerome Formal, who is working with Sabrina Gorge on the talent sprint, created something called GVDS on air. And I don't have it here in front of me on the screen because it is a very highly detailed resource of every single recording, mural, like literally everything that we have been creating on the Global Virtual Design Sprint, he put in his own mural to kind of showcase what everyone was doing. And then you have Sandy, who just spoke, who is responsible literally for all of the templates that we used throughout the entire session. She worked for over a month on not only creating these for other people to use, but actually worked with me and other people on getting some lo-fi versions together, iterating on a few of them as well. She's done numerous live broadcasts of virtual sprints as they were happening. So she's doing something like we're doing similar to what I'm doing today with YouTube, and that she showcased everything that was happening within her team and showing how teams were basically using Mural to do virtual design sprinting in a really positive fashion. And by the way, if you want to see how well Sandy influences people, just kind of do a search on YouTube for GVDS elephant, and you can actually see her engaging elephants and talking to them about sprints. And it's I think you're missing your calling, Sandy, in some fashion with that. But anyway, a couple things to note. There's also something we started with Rakesh Kasturi and Matt Stewart, something called a life sprint. You can Google this as well. This was taking the design sprint process and looking at it from life planning and kind of looking at how people are stuck with either themselves professionally or personally, and using the sprint process to kind of free them up from being stuck. And they worked with various participants within the GVDS to kind of work out the process, work out the offering, and had a lot of people try it out. And now they're taking their concept and moving it forward outside of the GVDS into a viable product. So that was really interesting to see. And then finally, I'll close with this, is that we have a number of things that come from the event itself that are noteworthy and that people really appreciate. First is the GVDS Presents. In October, I featured a whole bunch of leaders in the design sprint space, and I interviewed them and kind of featured them in webinars like Jake Knapp, Steph Cruchon, Douglas Ferguson, Bill Alexi, Sandy Lamb, Mark Tippin, a lot of people from Mural, really kind of to showcase the kind of thinking that went into this, as well as the supporting community around it. Coming up in the last week of December is GVDS Showcase. All of those teams you just saw and all their ideas, we're going to give them an opportunity to present them publicly, live, for people to see what their solutions were to problems. And we'll be inviting influencers and people in the industry that are central to those problems to kind of connect them with the solutions they had. At the end of the event, we do Spotlight Awards. This is a peer-based system where practitioners can vote other practitioners together, or vote other practitioners for awards and for recognition. And in fact, Sandy Lamb is the April GVDS Most Valuable Practitioner and was beat out literally everybody else by about 2-1 margin in terms of just how effective and powerful her contributions were for that. And then finally, this is the business outcropping of the GVDS called the Referral Network. So the GVDS community, basically, if people see their work online, whether it's working within a sprint or some of the other social media promotions that we do, if someone wants to inquire and figure out how they can get a hold of them or maybe bring them in for a project, this is an outlet for businesses and organizations to do so. And then we just connect the practitioner with the business and they're off to the races. And that's the summation of my presentation. I think I am at time. Where do we go from here, Andrew? Would you like to go to Q&A and see what people have questions about, or check out Mentimeter? Where would we like to go here?
Yeah, if there are any questions that have come in, let's see if we can pick the questions up now for a Menti, and then I'll pick those up and then perhaps move on to the discussion around how to kickstart remote sprints.
Cool.
Perfect.
So,
yeah, I would just mention the URL and the code again in case people haven't. I've pulled a couple questions off, and I can MC some of these if we want to jump in. Let's see. I'll summon you. There we go. So first question that came in was, what are the top 2 or 3 key differences between running a local versus a remote sprint? And focusing on things we probably wouldn't anticipate until after we went through the process.
So the one key difference is the difference between online together time and offline load time. So with doing a remote or virtual sprint, your time together is drastically reduced. It's not a 30-hour week or a 40-hour week of a 5-day sprint that's normally used to, or maybe even 3 days. You typically spend 3 to 4 hours on Monday, 3 hours on Tuesday, a couple hours on Wednesday, and then everything else is either you arrange meetings where it makes sense for people's schedules, or you just basically work in something like Basecamp or offline to coordinate on the work in a passive way, so that it's much more it's very schedule friendly. The flip side of that is that for the people that are getting involved, it tends to be a bit more work intensive, depending on what your role is, if you're a designer, researcher, and so on. Some people usually aren't used to that level of activity related to a sprint and the kind of work you do, but it's much more concentrated, and you basically put your effort into the right frame of mind, so that you're not doing a lot of other different things at the same time. The other key difference is that you have more of your time back. I know that seems counterintuitive with a sprint, but there's a lot of time spent for commuting, getting snacks, getting supplies, kind of setting the stage and kind of going through all that, and there's cleanup. Virtually, you don't need to do any of that. Literally, you can work in something like Mural. Everything is digital. You can still create analog artifacts offline, but it really is a much more versatile way of doing a design sprint than doing one that's local.
I want to add one more thing. It's the time zone difference. It's very tricky sometimes.
That's true.
Because, yeah, so you may not be working with just one time zone and people are all over the place. So sometimes I have to stay, like, if I'm working with someone in Australia, for example, now it's 2 a.m. here. So just have to deal with that if you're the facilitator. So
Yeah, if I was to add something else, I would say it's helpful to time box by template. I'm able to keep people on point much better when we have templates in front of us. I also find it valuable to have a person that's really, really energetic. So that whole CEO, Chief Energy Officer, becomes important. You have to have exaggerated energy. And I think being extra sensory to what's going on in the room, you can't look at people. You don't have the full array of feedback and what they're doing. So you really have to be looking around at the cursors, being self-aware, and bringing people into the conversation.
Yeah, and if you ever want to Google a name called Lisa Lambert, Lambert, she's probably the best at that I've seen at virtual sprints and kind of keeping that energy up with teams. In fact, a lot of what she taught us about facilitation in April has kind of made its way into the culture of the November sprint that we had. So yeah, that's one name that you could point to that was like, okay, that's a perfect example of that.
And I want to make sure that was Christina Lambert.
Lisa Lambert.
Lisa Lambert, thank you.
Yeah. What's next, MC Tippin?
All right. All right, so next up, let me move to a different topic here. We had someone under the topic of design sprinting in general. I've been in design sprints where prototyping was something that could have been thought up in an hour-long brainstorm. How do you ensure prototypes are ambitious enough and warrant an entire week?
My answer is that if that situation occurred, then there wasn't a proper conversation to frame the engagement early on. Basically, design sprints are not a silver bullet. They're specifically used for, the process is specifically used for particular engagements where you can get the most out of it. And it is a pretty hefty chunk of time commitment from a lot of different people. It's something where if I hear that or I see that in the question, there are other techniques that you can use to basically elicit the type of information you're looking for in like a brainstorm. And brainstorms, by the way, are something I try to kind of hedge against because they tend to be all over the map. You can use things within the design sprint process to get the same kind of information or sorry, the same type of ideation. But in terms of whether or not your prototypes are ambitious enough or warrant an entire week, it comes down to the people you're bringing into the sprint and the setup before the sprint even starts and aligning expectations around what you're going to be getting out of the week.
Mm-hmm. Right. And one criticism of Agile is that people many times will ship stuff fast, right? It's all about accelerating the process, but is that process informed? Is it user informed? Is it information informed? And that's not something you can shortcut. So it's important to spend a lot of time understanding and teasing out the information you need to get the wisdom of the room and the wisdom of crowds to come up with the best ideas.
I can also, Mark, really quick, I can hit the one in the same box. It says, have you followed up on previous GVDS projects to see if they made it to release? In April, it wasn't an emphasis because it was the idea that if the team was enthusiastic, they could carry it forward. The problem with that philosophy and with the one in November is that unless there's a framework for that thing to exist or survive, it usually never does because everything else just kind of comes into view. The one exception actually is something that Lee posted recently about taking an original concept they had done in the November pilot, and I believe it organically evolved with blockchain to something that was featured in Austria that he went out for. But what I will also say that the GVDS showcase in the first week of December is specifically geared to tell the right people about what was done and then have a separate conversation about next steps with anyone that's interested or with the team. It'll be a different team, probably not the same 9 or 10 individuals, but they can have the conversation on where they want to take things. But the showcase is basically meant to jumpstart that conversation.
And I would also add, because I like to add things here apparently, is as this whole process of GVDS matures, in the beginning, we just wanted to figure out the process and we wanted to get informed and have access to experts. But I think now we're becoming more and more ambitious, where it's not just learning the process and getting the muscle memory. It's about creating something meaningful and something with high impact. And now what I'm observing is that a lot of these projects are serving as an incubator to really bright ideas. So I think now people are moving into the direction of not only what can we create together and how can we become well practiced, but what can we ship out of this?
Yeah, this particular one, this one that's happened in November, changed the conversation a bit. It started becoming where now that we got to your point, Lee, now that we got the process down, we kind of got the kinks out of the that they're hindering us in April, and we kind of gone through the motions in November. There's a feeling that there's something here, and I think it's just working it through and seeing where it can go. But I think I had certain expectations about how this would work out, and it hit 90 to 95% of those. Now I really have to circle around with the people that got involved with this to make sure that that feeling sticks with them, or at least it's reciprocated. And if so, then there's going to be some interesting conversations in December and January with you and with Sandy and with Mural about where this could potentially go. Where are we going to next?
Let's see, we have some questions on tools. So there's some questions around kind of essential toolkit. I think, what's the toolset apps used for remote, or what is your essential toolkit? I think they're essentially the same question, so I'll just put them kind of together here.
Sandy, do you want to take this on? I mean, do you want to kind of talk about the kind of tools that you've experienced? Because you've been headlong into kind of getting involved with the design sprints themselves. So what would you say to this?
Well, we use quite a few different tools. I think one of the biggest challenge for remote design sprint is the communication part. So we have used Slack, and we are experimenting with Basecamp right now. And the other thing is, of course, like we also use Google Docs and those collaboration tools, as well as one thing that also have to remember is some of the tools don't really work in some countries, and it can be tricky when you work with a remote team that are from different parts of the world. For example, like Zoom doesn't work in UAE countries, and you wouldn't even know that until you facilitate someone that is from that country. So yeah,
Apparently WebEx does.
Apparently what?
Apparently WebEx does.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah, to your point, yeah, you have to kind of have to know those nuances.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add Mural just because we're here.
Well, Mark.
I'm the plant. Oh,
Yes.
somehow Mural got into the list too.
Have you remembered
That was
about
awkward.
the application right now? You know, we were so used to it. It's just basically like we're used
It's the water we swim in, right? Yeah.
Right.
So.
And Robert, I just added, because there's a handful of great questions on here. I'm putting some little sticky notes next to some that we could also kind of help answer during the Mural section. I add another 4 minutes and 50 seconds to this question part, if everybody's agreeable to that.
Do you want to do a lightning round at some point at the end of this, so that between now and when we go into how to do a virtual sprint, you have enough time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's fine.
All right.
Yeah, we'll have enough time.
Following on from tool set, what are the critical aspects of the technology infrastructure, fast internet connection? You have to have a decent internet connection, but the other aspect of it is that the person that's getting involved has to have a laptop that isn't 6 years old. We had a couple of people that had a laptop that was 3 years old, and it was struggling a bit with rendering Mural and just with some of the other technologies. It wasn't a barrier to getting to contributing, but it is one of those things that is a side distraction that if you have 2 facilitators, it works, but it may tend to hinder things every so often. I think that's pretty much it. Murals, well, here's a pro for Mural is that we've done 2 major events with Mural in this regard, and the ability to kind of learn its interface and work with it, the adoption rate is pretty good. So that's got Mural has that going for it, is that I can throw Mural in front of like a complete stranger, and the tool set is simple enough so that they can get involved with some of the exercises right off the bat, and then usually through the team that they work with, they can fill in the gaps.
Especially when you make use of the summon feature and the follow feature.
Yes.
You can lead people around, so that's quite helpful. You don't have to be able to navigate the page. It's very easy. So anyway, the facilitator can bring people around.
That's great. We'll probably touch on that a little bit too, because I think we have a persona specifically around facilitator, which is a little unique, right? We acknowledge there's someone that's trying to herd cats and keep things on track. So hopefully we're adding the things in there that help that actually happen in the real world. There are a couple questions coming in near back to local versus remote. Are there situations or applications when a virtual design sprint would be a better option than an in-person design sprint, even when all the participants are in the same location?
My sarcastic answer is when a few people have extreme halitosis. Yeah, don't put that down. Don't. No. That would be your Luma boss moment for me, as I would never want.
That's right. Like, no.
So are there situations, applications when design sprint would be a better option than in person? So here's some real situations that have occurred. There is someone that is in the family that is on medical watch. There is a situation at home where they need to be on call for something, or there's the possibility that there's really bad weather coming, and for the week, like in the winter months. Sometimes there's the real need to get without distractions, especially if what you're going after with a virtual sprint requires you to kind of be offline and work with the team to get things done. There's various reasons, but I find that it deals with context and situation and with people, and it's really having a handshake. Sometimes people want to have that face-to-face for the first day on Mondays, and then the rest of it's remote when it comes to actually executing and doing the prototype. So I've seen all sorts of flavors of this. It's usually never black and white, like just remote or local. For the ones that are pure remote or virtual, who want to take a leap of faith, at least on the consulting side of things, I'm just getting more and more people that are just going, I want to do more of this, but we have to figure out a proper situation for this to work.
I would add also, in cases where the only way you can do a design sprint is to have it be highly fragmented, it's great to have it all on a canvas in one place. You can come back to it. And also during events that are artifact rich, where there are a lot of visual samples, there are documents, etc., you can have that one place where all that information exists, and it's easier to draw upon it as you need it. It becomes a data lake of information.
And I have actually gotten feedback from the workshops, the design sprint that I facilitated before, to say that actually they felt running it remotely was more efficient than doing it in person. So.
Yeah, one other little thing I want to add is I'm involved, I do a lot of enterprise sprints, and sometimes there'll be multiple follow-on sprints. In fact, we could be continuing the cycle of a sprint for up to 6 months after. So we may have several additional sprints. And if we can call upon the original body of information, as opposed to recreate it from scratch, that's quite useful. So that's how Mural helps us. And
Lee, to add on to that, in my experience in an enterprise environment, there's a person that owns the sprints, the nature of the sprint going forward. So they take with them all of the previous knowledge of what's occurred before, and they in effect become an in-team subject matter expert. So we are at time again. Lindsey, what do you want to do?
Andrew, I want to kind of, since you're there in the room, sense the room. There are a couple of other questions we can do. We could do like a 1-minute lightning round to answer these last, I think it's 3 maybe, because I stole one of them for me to answer. We've got about 19 minutes left.
I guess if there are still questions coming in from floor here, we can pick up the questions, or if there's anything you wanted to show in particular around kickstarting remote sprints in your own environment. If there's sort of hints and tips you've got around that, if there's some templates that you feel could be valuable, that might be worth moving on to. And then if we have some time after that, revisiting any of the outstanding questions.
Perfect.
Okay.
So what if I set to like 12 minutes, and then we'll still have a couple minutes at the end to revisit back to questions. And then everybody keep an eye on that Mentimeter link and keep typing them in. We'll keep aggregating them into the Mural. But what I can do actually, Robert, do you want to keep the screen share or you want me to steal it from you?
Go ahead and steal it from me.
I can't.
Well, and I'm just going to stop sharing. I'm going to take my share and go home. You go ahead and do what you want. Wow, there's a lot of people over at Cindy. Hi, everyone. I can finally see it. I'm looking at a screen. Hey.
Hello, everybody.
You're a very well-dressed group of people. I'll tell you that. Even just from looking at it over there, you're looking really dapper. So good. Go for it, Lindsay.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hello everybody, and I guess good afternoon. So we're going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to set a timer for maybe 10 minutes. And we're going to talk a bit about doing your own design sprint. I'm going to give a bit of context about what Mural is, and then Mark, Lee, Sandy, Robert, everybody can chime in on how they actually use the application to it. Can everybody see my screen? We'll see how many thumbs up I can get in the room.
Can, yep.
I got a bunch. Thanks, guys. What is Mural? We've actually been in Mural this entire time, as Robert alluded to. I'm going to scroll all the way out, and you can see the entire canvas. So what Mural is, and if you want to learn more, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Mural is a digital whiteboard, and with its prime kind of value of being able to visually and digitally collaborate. Again, you can do that in person or remote, but for this specific situation, it's for that case of being able to use it. It is a cloud-based solution, so it's available. You're gonna have your best performance on Google Chrome, and we also have iOS and Windows applications. So a lot of people use it for increasing collaboration, problem solving, visual thinking, scaling of innovation. You can kind of see where I'm going with this, but with the thread of what Robert and Sandy and actually Lee and Mark have already talked about is the application in terms of design sprints. I always like to mention at least what Mural is, so that the first question that comes in from Mentimeter is not what is it, and is it a cloud-based application? So for when it comes to design sprints, and this is where I'm going to call it on Lee and Mark a little bit, what I've added into this canvas is a bit about how to do design sprints in Mural. Within Mural, we have something called templates. I'm going to kind of slowly side pan right here. But templates are pre-designed Mural canvases that you can leverage and use one of your own. So for example, there is a link, and we can share, and I can get all of these shared out to everybody about design sprints within Mural, and all kinds of really great information. And you can actually click and get started from the template. And so for a template, and I'm gonna let that load. It's a starting point. It has all the different instructions that you can use, and you can get started pretty much right away. As Robert was mentioning, it is good to get everybody accustomed and understanding how to use the platform. But for the typical interactions that people will do, double clicking, adding sticky notes, etc., it's pretty user friendly to do so. So Lee, Mark, thoughts on anything I said so far, and things you want to add? I know Lee, you probably have tons of things to talk about.
The one thing I'll say is templates are great. They become autonomous design, self-driving design. You don't have to do much. You can just open up a template and get going. I like the fact that I can basically run a design session with about 5 to 10 minutes of notice. And actually this has occurred on numerous occasions, but unless you tell them, they don't know. And so it's all there. And these are all things I used to have to create by hand, but just click on a button and you have a template. And you can break it out any way you want, depending on the maturity of the group that you're working with, what stage you are in the design process, the difficulty and complexity of your wicked challenge. So all these are helpful. And I also add a few little points in there along the way, which you might see. But
I love those, so I'm slowly zooming through each one. So you have a nice little visual as you're talking.
Yeah, but yeah, and one of the biggest things I've learned with enterprise design sprints, and this has been said before, but it's absolutely true, is it drives radical alignment. There's so much alignment that needs to be had as far as alignment on what the problem is, alignment on what the actual deliverables will be, alignment on what the dates are for delivery. And Mural helps with that. Mural helps drive that alignment. You write it down, and typically in a normal previous environment, you would come up with smart ideas and they would evaporate into the air. So we use Mural for all of that to capture things and to you know, to iterate on those ideas. And it also helps me create sprint culture. So it's much easier for me to develop these the design mindset using these Mural templates and sharing them out. And I can also scale it very easily. I don't have to be in every meeting. All I have to do is kind of pick out the templates that I think are important and send those around. So anyway, those are some quick tips.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is the templates themselves are wonderful ways for you to distill a particular set of activities, bake in all the instructions, time boxing, and guidance for people that that maybe are just getting into facilitation. So it's this way for you to kind of spread best practices. But I also find anytime there's a new project, Mural becomes a virtual space for me to do my information collecting, my visualization, my own internal stakeholders, right? Even for, you know, thinking about engaging with you here today, we started mapping out, you know, who's going to be on the panel, what are the topics, what does this look like, how are we going to build out a mural that will facilitate the discussion we want to have and the amount of time we have, and so all of that thinking gets done visually. And I think the most profound thing about working visually is something you also see in design sprints themselves is when you have ideas locked away in your head, they're yours and you own them and you can renegotiate what you meant by that. But as soon as you start committing stuff visually out into a shared space, those ideas belong to the group. And so you end up negotiating that reality in real time. And so the efficiencies that you gain by working visually just accelerate all the conversations, all of the, you know, with Zoom, we love Zoom. And with Zoom, I can see you. With Mural, I can see what you mean. And with those two things together, the ability to really take on more complexity, work more swiftly and at a distance just becomes more of a way of getting stuff done.
Yeah, and sometimes people need structure and discipline to have that sense of freedom, which seems counterintuitive, but Mural does that. So yeah, it's been quite helpful to me, and it's also a forcing function for innovation. It keeps people working within the lines, not running away and running off on a tangent. So those are some things that I use.
And tying together what you both said and some of the questions from before about facilitation and things like that, you'll notice that we've been using the timer within Mural. There's also voting capability as well. Some of these are part of the and the summon. I was doing that to some people before. These are all part of our facilitator superpowers. Kind of as Mark was mentioning, and I know there was a question about how to learn more about remote facilitation. Two different resources that we have as well, and we'll make sure these are shared out, but at mural.co/ebook, so a very simple URL comparatively to a nice long stream. We have a book about facilitating remote workshops. Really great information. It's not just about Mural, it's about how you use all, there we go. Mark has the physical copy as well. We'll get Mural to send me over to Sydney. I'll bring a bunch to everybody. A little plug for me. And so it has a lot of great, just kind of, it's facilitating in a different way when you're doing it on remotely versus in person, and it gives some tips and tricks. And then there's a whole different group of facilitator superpowers that we're enabling you through Mural to try to help you facilitate the content, or not facilitate the content, sorry, that's terrible wording for that, but so you can focus on what you're trying to get done, and then that Mural can help you through that remote facilitation. So things like an outline, being able to super lock down content so participants can't move your content around when they're adding sticky notes and things like that. So timing.
Right. Yeah, just to play on that. So I mean, a lot of people don't think about this, but we actually only have a certain finite amount of metabolic cognitive energy to solve problems. And if you're using all of your energy as a group on trying to figure out what the methodology is and to keep everyone on task, you're wasting a lot of that resource. So you can then focus all of that energy on coming up with ideas.
No, I love that, Lee. Thank you. That was probably a more wonderful way of something I was attempting to say, which is when we're working together. So with 43 minutes left on the clock, as promised, I wanted to keep that with 8 minutes left so that we can answer more questions, or is there more around that topic that everybody would like to explore? Because all we'll need at the end is probably a minute or so to talk about some of our little closing items as well. But I wanted to kind of pause there. Mark, do we have more questions?
We do. We have a grid of them here. I'll summon you. So.
And I got a quick clarification. Now, is there something that's coming up straight at the bottom of the hour that we have to move out of the way for, Andrew, so that somebody else gets set up and talks about something?
After you guys is an absolutely critical session that we really don't want to eat into. It's called lunch.
Well, the reason why I ask is because if we go over, we spill over by 5 minutes, just want to make sure that's okay with everyone involved. Because I have a sense the Q&A could go there.
You guys can see your attendees here. I'll let you gauge how hangry they're looking. I'll let you gauge.
If the growl of the stomach kind of goes over the audio, then we'll have to leave. I understand. I never would want to deny anyone food. That would be disingenuous of me. So anyway, keep going, Lindsey. What were you saying?
I came back over to the questions. So maybe what I do, we want to do the two closeout items and then the questions, or the questions and the closeout items? Dealing with voice, Robert.
I'd say go do the closeout, and then we can just ride Q&A into the sunset.
Sounds good.
You read my mind. You do the first one, I'll do the second one. I call this mural riffing.
Okay. I'm still following you, so you go ahead and take me where you want to. Oh, there we go. All right, so for those of you in the audience that have been looking at all of this and going, how do we get involved with remote design sprints or virtual design sprints or whatever you want to call it? If you're interested in being part of one, I'm set up specifically for the Sydney, Australia contingent of folks that practice design sprints or going into one, a virtual lightning decision jam. This is going to be a 90-minute session. Essentially, the link is there in the Mural, but once you click on it, it's going to be a webinar registration in Zoom. It's taking place at, I think I got it at 3 p.m. local time there in Sydney on a Wednesday, which would be December 4th. But you can sign up for that if you are interested. I would be emceeing it, I'd be hosting it, and I can guide you through the nuances of doing a virtual lightning decision jam, which is the gateway into doing virtual design sprints.
And the second part is, if you're interested in trying out Mural, there's an opportunity to try out a 30-day free trial, lots of different resources. And you can also reach out to me as well. I put my email in there, lindsey@mural.co, if you'd like kind of specific help in getting started, especially for the use case of design sprints. So I'm going to switch back over and let's ride the questions into the sunset.
Somebody do some galloping noises. We can kind of make that. All right. So so really quick, do you want to do a lightning round and just kind of go through these and comment on them, or we can do that? We'll make best use of our time so that everyone gets their food on time.
Let's do this. I'll answer. I'll answer the questions, and you tell me what was the.
You can go ahead and answer everything. That's fine.
That's right. I'll ask a question and jump in. So one of the main things for facilitators in a sprint is to always be capturing. On the whiteboard, where is this done in a virtual sprint?
Everyone pretty much in the sprint puts in their 2 cents, meaning that it's not the facilitator's job to be capturing everything. It's the facilitator's job to be guiding the conversation through the different templates that you are working with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say that's probably the first thing people don't realize is Mural isn't a passive experience, right? Everyone has their own portal directly into this space and can be adding information. So if anything, it's sometimes putting on the brakes and making sure you have time to synthesize the quantity of data that is put into a digital space.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, how do you get non-technical stakeholders engaged in a virtual design sprint? They may have business objectives in mind, they may not be enthused by the design process itself.
If they don't want to be there, I don't force it. If they can contribute in a different way, be it before the design sprint or setting the stage in terms of like business outcomes, I want to try to position them for success. So I try to figure out what makes more sense for their time. Because if they're forced into a design sprint and they're there, they have plenty of, they can think of rationale or reasons why they should not be. Before I was of the mindset where they needed to be there. Now I'm not there so much. I think you really have to cater to what a person can contribute and where they can be most effective.
Yep, and I would add some additional things. Sometimes for technical people, I'll do some code switching. I'll use words and language to describe it in a way that is more consistent with the language and terminology that they use, just to not scare them away and not frighten them. So I try to make the process very approachable. And then also many times I will augment and modify the process based on how much time I have with them and things that may be more appealing. So usually I think of it as, the habit you keep is better than the habit you break. And I will modify the process to get people involved, especially when we need them. So that's an approach I use.
Sounds good. All right, moving right along. If you have no access to research material or no research has been done yet, can you still do a design sprint?
Yes. Next.
Next. How do you do the sketching exercises?
In virtual sprints, they can be done two ways. One is that can be done offline so that you have about 12 hours to do them. I don't do crazy eights anymore. I do fractal pathing, which is something I'm going to write an article about later on. If you do them in session, they take about a half an hour to get done, and you can almost skip the ideas, or sorry, the notes section, because they have exposure to everything. You just go straight into ideas, and then you go into solution sketching.
Yeah, and we're experimenting with sketching with an iPad, just to let you know. We don't have that nailed yet. We're working on it. But as far as the user test flow and the storyboarding, et cetera, we make use of some of the storyboarding templates, et cetera. And then we use some of the components that are available on the left-hand side and draw from those UI-like components.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can also do that too. I've seen people do that.
It's a hack, but it works well for us.
Yeah, we also use the image search and the icons on Mural, so then we can do the creative. Yeah. So we just drop it in instead of drawing it by.
And if you type in UI, et cetera, in that bar, I think you'll get some interesting things.
Mm-hmm. Do you use Mural for storyboarding as well? Yep, we do. Every virtual design sprint, I think Sandy has a storyboard where people kind of graph that out and use it. Although some teams use Figma. It just depends on the nature of the team. Sorry, I didn't mean to take your position, Mark. Go for it.
No, that was fine. No, it was a follow-on. That's why I threw it. I changed the order because I thought, well, storyboarding is relevant. So I was wondering, do you use the same format for virtual and design sprints as you do with in-person?
No, in fact, it's probably much more diverse. And I would say that you use a custom recipe pretty much for every virtual sprint that you do, with the idea that you have a baseline to work off of. And then the facilitator figures out between that and what the outcomes are, what you want to mix in terms of like the activities. I would also argue that's the future of the design sprint, beyond it being virtual, is that it's going to be highly custom. And literally all the outcroppings you've seen in the latter part of the year of 1 hour design sprints and half-day design sprints, there's a lot of experimentation going on with that, and it's just going to continue. And it's probably going to combine service design elements and growth hacking and other things. And you're going to see a whole bunch of different recipes and approaches to doing it.
Yep. And I use each sprint as an opportunity to come up with some type of personalized medicine, what's working best. So every sprint is an experiment, and I find certain types of sprints work better for certain types of challenges and for certain types of people. So I keep a number of different templates available in Mural for the different types of sprints, but typically I use every sprint as an opportunity to experiment and learn something new.
Yep.
Which is a bit meta, right?
Yes.
It's using the process to learn the process and grow the process. Yeah, which is great.
In our final minute.
All right.
Okay, really fast. Let me try this out. When time is a constraint, a virtual sprint is required. How do you convert the non-digital savvy participants who prefer physical artifacts? Again, same vein as before. I don't try to convert anyone. I just basically try to figure out how I can make it work for them in a way that seems intuitive, and then see if we can meet at a halfway point. How have you adjusted the process based on your learnings from just distributed sprints? Which tool sessions work better or worse than distributed? I've been adjusting for every design sprint that I've been doing within the Global Virtual Design Sprint. The tools and sessions basically get hammered out by the people who get involved. And then I just watch very closely in terms of feedback and what they respond to. What's the difference between Mural and Mural? Mural sucks. Do you send them equipment or give them a list? I was only kidding about Mural, by the way. The main difference is that it's stylistic and it depends on what you tend to emphasize and what you're familiar with. I'm familiar with Mural. I've been working with them for 2 years. That's why I tend to work with them more, but I have worked in Mural. Probably will maybe explain that in the future. Do you send them equipment or give them a list? I usually have a checklist that we give people at the very beginning of sprints. I try to put them in video format so that they're easily consumable. But that would be a Sandy Lamb question more so than me, because she's the architect of the templates and kind of how we've approached bringing people into virtual sprints to get them informed about what's going on.
Boom.
Wow.
And that's why he's Robert Skrobe.
No, that's why I was a former DJ and trying to get all that in.
Well, listen, thank you guys. What a fantastic global presentation. People scattered all around the globe, being able to come together and talk about design sprints and use a cloud platform to share not just their ideas and their input, but share artifacts and record the artifacts and be able to roll them forward and use them for the next stage after design, which is actually turning something into a real live practical piece of software or product. So guys, a quick round of applause. I hope you can hear this. You have to make it really loud. And now, one quick announcement before we head for some lunch, just to let the mini sprint jam people make sure you've got the cards that will help you form your teams for this afternoon. If you haven't got the cards, I think you've all met Leanne as you registered. Check with Leanne if you're in the sprint jam, you don't have a card for your team. And on that note, thank you guys. Lunch is ready. Thank you guys. That was absolutely fantastic. I'm sure you can see from the people here, it went really well.
So
Wonderful.
you want to do a quick snapshot of all of us really fast to commemorate the thing? Just go ahead and grab something like we normally do right next to it.
Hold on 1 second.
There he is.
Where is Leanne having your sprint session?
Downstairs.
Oh, she's downstairs.
Yep.
I think we're done.
I got a photo also.
Okay.
There he is.
There he is.
There
Are you ready?
Sorry, guys, I was just taking you all off auditorium speaker so that I could actually come and talk to you without having the conversation relate to everybody in the building. Listen, guys, that was absolutely fantastic. I hope you got the sense from all of the questions that were coming in, Mark, that there was a lot of interest in the audience. You got a lot of feedback.
Wonderful. Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you very much for kicking this all up, and Lee for taking the charge, and Robert and Sandy for like adding the actual meat in the sandwich and allowing us to do our dog and pony there at the end. Really
A
appreciate
lot
it.
of portobello mushroom in that thing.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
Seriously, guys, I think I can hand on heart say my entire involvement was saying yes at some point to a suggestion from Lee, and then after that, I think you guys did it all. I can hardly claim any input at all, and that was genuinely fantastic. I don't know if you plan on doing more of these kind of conference pitches, but I'll give you some off the cuff feedback. That was a massively effective way of conveying what it is you're doing, and very effective.
Great.
Glad to hear it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, that worked super well. If booking up to do this kind of team presentation at a conference, that worked super well.
Great.
So now I'm going to leave you to it, and I'm going to go and enjoy
Wait,
whatever the caterers have brought for lunch.
Wonderful.
That's something not good to say, Andrew, when you just sent everyone to go eat whatever you think the caterers got. That may be a really bad thing, because they may come back and go, Andrew, there's nothing there. There's like plates. They serve cupcakes, Andrew. What's going on?
It's Australia. If they get hungry, they'll just sling another shrimp on the barbie. It'll be fine.
Heard that before.
That's
Great.
right.
Okay.
See you
Thank
guys.
much.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers.
You all want to stick around and
Okay.
just basically do a little bit of like post event stuff? Because Sandy, I know you not got to go because it's 2 a.m. You got to go to sleep. But do y'all want?
I got 5
Do-
if you want to
I got
be
5.
brief.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to stop the live streaming first?
Yeah, that's live stream.
That's true. That's hilarious.
I tried to ping that in the panelists. And
Thank you for reminding us.